Is Putin robbing money from a major U.S. tech company to fund his war in Ukraine? And is it in response to the tech company declaring war on Russia? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about this weird story. This is actually coming to us originally from The Telegraph, who obtained leaked documents from a Russian court that found that Putin ordered the seizure of $75 million, or 75 million pounds, about $100 million, from Google's Moscow bank accounts in an effort to fund Russia's war in Ukraine, right? Particularly, Russian authorities took $75 million from Google to fund TV propaganda to bankroll Putin's bankroll production and media control to shore up sort of public messaging of the Russian war in Ukraine. Now, what's even stranger is that this is part of a long time conflict between Russia and Google. And it's worth noting, again, Google, when you look at Google's market cap, you could see it's actually huge relative to the state of Russia. Russian total GDP. For example, here's an interesting comparison. The gross domestic product of Russia, 2.2 trillion, and then the market cap of Google, Alphabet Class C shares, is 2 trillion. So actually, these are two peers in some ways going after one another across the globe. Now, obviously, Google doesn't have an army, but they do have an army of lawyers across the globe. And this is as a result, the San Francisco-based firm filed lawsuits against two of the broadcasters of Russia's channels, NFPT, in U.S. and English courts last week. And this is also part of a series of lawsuits launched by the Russian government against Google in places like South Africa, Turkey, Serbia, and Kyrgyzstan. South Africa, some of these courts are finding in favor of Russian entities, while others may seem to just be stretching it out, right? It's part of what they claim is a debt from Google's international businesses. Now, you could see, again, here in the US and UK, Google is going after RT in court, right? An attempt to block a legal battle over RT's removal from YouTube. U.S. tech giant has filed lawsuits in British and American courts against RT's owner, TV Novosti, and two other broadcasters, including Sarsgaard Media, owned by a pro-Kremlin oligarch, not officially owned by the Russian state. Right? Google seeks a ruling that will prevent the channels from pursuing the technology giants in courts outside of Russia. So basically, Google's saying, tell them to stop harassing us because what you're doing is illegal. And Moscow, of course, racking up fines over the years. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But, right, this is part of a really, sounds like a very convoluted effort because, again, Russia's suing in a bunch of third world courts, or developing world courts, I should say, while the NFTP, while Google's suing in English and California courts, saying that you can't sue us in these other courts. It's pretty bizarre. And again, something that can really only happen when you have a corrupt, autocratic regime like Russia fighting against a multinational corporation like Google. Now, Google also points out that a lot of these entities that are filing lawsuits against them are actually subject to international sanction. So again, you're not even supposed to be able to exist. You're a sanctioned entity. How can you possibly file a lawsuit? So very, very convoluted stuff. Interestingly, a spokesman for RT responded to an email from Yahoo News with the response saying, quote, "Curiouser and curiouser," some sort of Alice in Wonderland type reference. Now we're going to talk about kind of the way how this conflict has come to this point, and some more interesting data about what Russians, why is Russia so threatened by YouTube? But first, if you feel like you are threatened by fatigue, you don't need to go after a $2 trillion multinational company. You may just need a little extra caffeine. That's why I created Strike Gum, inspired by my time in Afghanistan, when in order to get caffeine on long combat patrols, I actually had to take energy drinks, military issue energy drinks called Rippets, on patrol with me. And if you've ever had a 110-degree warm soda with extra caffeine, you haven't, it really sticks in your brain. So I said, there's a better way. So I figured out a way. I worked with Liquid Core down in Denver, a U.S. manufacturer, and we created Strike Gum. It's got 90 milligrams of caffeine in every piece. That's as much as a Red Bull, as much as an Amp Energy, plus 100 milligrams alpha GPC, and no sugar. That means no sugar crash at all. So you can't lose. StrikeGum.com. Get the 5-pack. This is the equivalent of 25 energy drinks, right? If you had to buy that many from a gas station, it's going to cost you, $125? Of course, this is, get you 5 packs. You can put one in your glove box, one in your home office, your gym bag, and you're going to have energy wherever you go. It's $25 on StrikeGum.com. The link is in the description. Okay, so first off, let's talk about this battle. This has been a long ongoing battle between YouTube and Russia. And the number one reason, right, you can see just a couple weeks ago, YouTube was banned in Russia. And the reason is simply that the Russian government has realized that the YouTube platform was one of the last free speech platforms still accessible to the general Russian public. More than 50 million Russians use YouTube every day. So that puts it, let's see, Russia, the whole country is 130 million. So we're talking about more than 1 in 3 Russians use YouTube on a daily basis. And that means, though, that they can access all sorts of different sources of information. That includes non-Kremlin approved media sources that may reveal true things about the war in Ukraine. Of course, as they point out, there's also a lot of Russian-based content creators who are going to lose out with this ban, as well as a variety of other media outlets that rely on YouTube to kind of amplify their message. So it's not great for the Russian economy, but it's really bad for the Russian public who depend on YouTube for information, for sometimes unbiased information. Now, the administration, of course, likely has their own YouTube alternative that's generally been kind of Russia's playbook to take Western tech that's a little too free and create a censored Kremlin-approved version. I think there is like a VK video or something. I think so. It's like VK video something. Yeah, here we go. It's called VK video. And as you can see, it looks like a horrible Twitch. It looks like a horrible Twitch, but it's not. It's YouTube as well. It's their YouTube alternative. And if you're like, this looks kind of janky, it's literally Russian YouTube. So that should tell you, again, it's something that the Kremlin can control much tighter, and it wants to force users away from that platform. Now, here's the thing. I looked up some interesting data and sort of to illustrate just how much the Russians can depend on foreign sources like mine about the war in Ukraine. And I'm just one example, right? And I'm very explicitly an American, right? It's right there, U.S. Army combat veteran. And still, this is the chart of the last year. Now, I looked up 2 roughly comparable countries in my kind of national stretch. You could see here is Brazil, which has a roughly comparable population size. And here, just 4 positions down, is Russia. This is how many views I've gotten and watch time I've gotten from these 2 countries. Now, as you can see, neither one is especially highly ranking in my data. Obviously, I'm an English language creator. English language countries are the ones that are most popular. But I think Brazil is a good analogy. Again, roughly the same size economy, roughly the same size population. Both speak a language other than English. And you can see that for the last 12 months, they've pretty much moved in roughly in sync, right? You could see a small surge in February 2024 where I got a lot more Russian viewers than Brazilian, but then it kind of trended back, right? You can see as my channel has good months, there's more viewers, but Brazil remains pretty consistently. You could see that really starting in about January, I suddenly got more Russian viewers than Brazilian viewers. A really interesting trend, and maybe something that troubled the Kremlin. If this illustrates a larger experience, as the Kremlin tightens their control of the media space, more Russians would turn to alternative news sources. But you could see in June, right around the time YouTube begins to get throttled by the Russian public or by the Russian government, it starts to invert again. Suddenly, I'm getting more Brazilians and fewer Russians. And now, in August, you can see that for the first time, the trends are going in an opposite direction. Now, there's Brazilians I'm growing my Brazilian audience, and I'm losing tremendously my Russian audience. In fact, almost a third of my Russian audience has vanished overnight. So a really interesting illustration of the fact that, again, Russians, and I'm not a huge channel by any means, but you can see that for Russians, a lot of them do turn to these English language US-based news sources when they don't feel they can get their news reliably from Russian state media. And that only recently we've seen that the Russian audience specifically has begun to peel off. Now, bear in mind, guys, a lot of Russians rely on VPNs, and so they may appear in YouTube's data to be from different other countries, and so the actual number of Russian viewers may be higher. In fact, I may not have lost viewers at all because the Russians may be just using VPNs to get access to the channel. Anyway, guys, that is all I had. I know you guys thought I was going to do a VPN ad read. Listen, I don't have any sponsors. I have you guys, and I have Combat Vet News, and I have Strike Gum. That's it, lads. Anyway, huge thank you to the Colonel tier members, particularly Bill Collier, Robin Colburn, Gaius Marini, Eugenia Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Fran Zacharias, and AL90. Couldn't do it without you guys, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier folks. You guys are the ones who make this whole thing possible. I appreciate you so much. Subscribe to the channel. Send a message to the Russian government that I'm making real content out here. Real news. So don't ban me. Or do. I don't care. I don't care what the Kremlin does. Anyway, take it easy, guys. See you in the next one. Cheers.